I hope you guys are doing good today. We are on to the Horus Heresy, and I did come across Arbiter Ian's video of the Horus Heresy timeline in 40 minutes, so I think that will at least give me a good idea. If you do get a chance, I'd appreciate if you can leave a like and subscribe. It helps me out a bunch, and I will have Arbiter Ian's video linked in my description below, so be sure to go like and subscribe to him. I really enjoy his channel. But alright, let's get on into it.
The Horus Heresy is probably the biggest conflict in Warhammer 40,000's grim dark history. A decade-long civil war that ripped the galaxy asunder and shaped the Imperium for the next 10,000 years. So, in this video, I'm going to go through the big picture. What happened and when? What battles were fought? And how Horus managed to burn a path all the way to terror.
I think this sounds perfect. This is just what I need, like the timeline. We know all the players involved for the most part, so I feel like just a little timeline of kind of, the sequence of how things unfolded. I think this is going to be perfect.
So the Horus Heresy is huge. It's the formative foundation myth of Warhammer 40,000's lore. The Great Crusade of the Emperor fought in the 30th millennium to unite humanity under his rule, and led by his 18 Primarchs, collapses in the fires of betrayal as his favourite son, Horus Lupercal, falls to chaos and leads half the armies of the Imperium against him in a war fought across every sector of the galaxy. The results tear the nascent Imperium apart, shatter the dreams of the Emperor, and lead to 10,000 years of stagnation, repression, and decline. It's so huge that I've already done a load of videos on it, from retrospectives on how the story has evolved over the last 30 years, to lore videos on all the factions in it. But until relatively recently...
Gosh, it's crazy to think that Warhammer's been around for like 30 years. That's pretty awesome.
Years to lore videos on all the factions in it. But until relatively recently, it hasn't been that possible to tell the story of the whole thing in detail, because it didn't exist. But years of Black Library novels and Forge World gamebooks have allowed us to construct a pretty detailed picture, at least, of what happened in what year. And so in this, I'm going to try and tell the story from the start to the end. How Horus's initial decisions laid the plans for rebellion early on, and how a surprisingly dogged loyalist defense made it harder and harder for the traitors to hold it all together. But it's worth saying that the history of the Horus Heresy is still a work in progress. It's not real, so events are still being added, and it's such a big conflict that you can add your own. That's what a lot of the narrative gaming events that happen are for. And of course, being so big and so embedded into the lore, there's a few different places you could start. Like most real-world wars, you can pick a number of dates as the start of the Horus Heresy, but I'm going to start this account at the turn of the 32nd millennium, in year 0 M31, as Horus Lupercal, Primarch of the Lunar Wolves, is named War Master. But it's worth examining the world in which this happens. The Horus Heresy occurred towards the end of the 200-year-long Great Crusade. In the late 600s, M30, the Emperor had fought the unification wars on Earth, conquering the wasted planet and pushing out into the solar system. The nascent Imperium had forged a steady alliance with the tech priests of nearby Mars, absorbed the naval powers of Saturn and Jupiter, and pacified the Selenar gene cults on Luna, all of which allowed the construction of the great fleets and armies that the Emperor's plans required. The first expeditionary fleets of the Great Crusade departed the solar system in 798 M30, composed of ships new and ancient and carrying hundreds of thousands of foot soldiers, headed by the pride of the Imperium, the 20 genetically engineered legions of the Legiones Astartes. Over the next 200 years, over 3,000 expeditionary fleets would conquer the galaxy, negotiating or forcing compliance on the scattered human colonies and empires they encountered, and fighting wars of extermination against alien species, with the Emperor at their head. Over time, the fleets discovered the 20 Primarchs, the Emperor's intended generals, and the genetic templates of the legions, who had been scattered during their creation, and they each took control of their legion, though two were lost in the alien wars to come. In order of discovery,
Will the two that got lost ever show up? Like, do you think that they will at some point be added, or are they just going to be forever lost and we'll just never know what happens to them? I've always been curious about that.
Legion, though two were lost in the alien wars to come. In order of discovery, these were Horus Lupercal of the 16th Legion Lunar Wolves on Chthoniya, Leman Russ of the 6th Legion Space Wolves on Fenris, Ferrus Manus of the 10th Legion Iron Hands on Medusa, Fulgrim of the 3rd Legion Emperor's Children on Chemos, Vulcan of the 18th Legion Salamanders on Nocturne, Rogel Dawn of the 7th Legion Imperial Fists on Inwit, Robut Gilliman of the 13th Legion Ultramarines on Macragge, Magnus the Red of the 15th Legion Thousand Sons on Prospero, Sanguinius of the 9th Legion Blood Angels on Baal, Lion L. Johnson of the 1st Legion Dark Angels on Caliban, Perturabo of the 4th Legion Iron Warriors on Olympus, Mortarion of the 14th Legion Death Guard on Barbarous, Lorgar of the 17th.
I've never actually seen the map of this where they all were and how they were all scattered. I didn't realize that they went out this far. Dang. Dang, they are really scattered. I for some reason I thought they were just kind of close by and just in like maybe like a general area, but they are really all over.
Legion Word Bearers on Colchis, Jagatai Khan of the 5th Legion White Scars on Chogodis, Conrad Kurz of the 8th Legion Night Lords on Nostromo, Angron of the 12th Legion World Eaters on Nuceria, Corax of the 19th Legion Raven Guard on Deliverance, and finally, the twin Primarchs Alfarius Omegon of the 20th Alpha Legion. And they're pretty much going to be our cast for the rest of this. By the
Yeah.
end of the 2nd century of the Crusade, in the late 900s M30, a tipping point had been reached. Humanity was the dominant force in the galaxy. The biggest alien threats, if not exterminated, then on their way there, and the completion of the Great Crusade all but inevitable. Of course, that isn't to say everything was perfect. Many of the Primarchs had been damaged by their experiences growing up, and some legions had considerable differences with mainstream Imperial culture. After a
Right.
campaign at Zaramund, the Dark Angels had suffered such schism in their ranks that they effectively exiled a part of their legion, committing them to a permanent garrison on the homeworld of Caliban in 970 M30. The Night Lords and their Primarch were a renegade legion in all but name, and after decades of torturous psychic visions and what they saw as betrayal by their homeworld, Nostromo, they returned and destroyed it in 984. Many of the Primarchs, especially the later discovered ones, harboured discontent at the methods of an emperor who, racing against time to complete his plans, had thrown them into the Crusade at the head of an unfamiliar army with barely any time for them to acclimatise to this new Imperium. The most egregious example of this was Lorgar, Primarch of the Word Bearers, who defied the Imperial truth, the Emperor's decree that the Imperium would be secular. All religion and worship was banned in the Imperium, part of the Emperor's plan to defeat the dark forces of chaos that preyed upon humanity. But Lorgar was a man of faith, and had spent a good portion of the Crusade indoctrinating the worlds he conquered into the belief that the Emperor was a god.
Right, right. Yeah, we watched that one not too long ago, but it seems kind of crazy. I mean, like it does and it doesn't. Like it just seems like what a coincidence of the planet that he ended up on turned out like this. And that's everything that the emperor doesn't like. But it's like what a coincidence.
When the truth was finally revealed, the Emperor punished and humiliated Lorgar, and while on the
Right.
surface the Primarch repented, in secret he just turned to the worship of the dark powers of the warp instead. By the end of the 30th millennium, far away at the edge of the Crusade, Lorgar and his word bearers had fallen completely to the worship of chaos and had started to put plans in motion for the overthrow of the Imperium. Horus Lupercal was the greatest of the Primarchs. Leader of the 16th Legion, the Lunar Wolves, he'd been with the Emperor since almost the start of the Crusade. A peerless leader and diplomat, one of the few amongst his brothers who could command all their respect. But the opening years of the 31st millennium would see his slow fall from grace. The Orc Empire of Ulanor was the final great alien threat to the Imperium, and in the opening year of M31, the Imperium laid it waste. 100,000 Astartes, including elements from the White Scars, the Ultramarines, and the Lunar Wolves, led by Horus and the Emperor himself, and supported by millions more human troops, defeated the Orc warlord Urlak-Urg and fractured his empire. In celebration, the Emperor declared a great triumph to be held, to recognize the glory of the Crusade, and it was attended by every martial force of the Imperium, including representatives from every legion and 9 of the Primarchs. And at this triumph, the Emperor declared his retirement from the Crusade. Time was still against him, and he had other tasks to achieve if humanity would be safe, and so, with the Crusade now unstoppable, he named Horus the War Master of the Imperium, in charge of prosecuting the Crusade to the very end. The Emperor himself would return to Terra to complete work on his secret Webway project, an attempt to release humanity from its dependence on dangerous interstellar warp travel.
Okay. So I do remember hearing all of this, like, up until this point, like, and there's, like, some other things I'm sure he's gonna go over that I do remember, but as far as, like, while I was learning about the Primarchs and the whole timelines and stuff, I wasn't really sure, like, where I guess, the start and end and everything in between was, because I know uh, like, when you go through all the Primarchs, it's not always, I guess, linear and all how all of that ends up working out. So I do like this. I do appreciate this because now I can see, like, where all the pieces are gonna fall into place for me.
There was little disagreement. Some of the Primarchs might have considered themselves the better claimant to such a role, but Horus was loved by all, and his brothers pretty much fell in line as the Crusade continued. Over the next couple of years, Horus commanded the trajectory of the Crusade with ease. The White Scars hunted the remnants of the Orc Empire into the isolated Chondak system, and the rest of the legions ventured off again into the darkness. The Emperor stayed true to his word, only emerging again in 01 M31 for the Council of Nicaea, to resolve the question of the use of psychic powers by the legions. The Primarchs Magnus the Red, Sanguinius, and Jagatai Khan advocated for these new Librarius departments, but the Emperor sided with the detractors, Liman Rus and Mortarion, and officially banned the use of psychic powers by the legions before returning to Terra to continue his work. This caused no small measure of upset, but the departure of the Emperor coincided with a few other developments that strained the legions. The Emperor's children
Did this all go down as like, did he do any, like, discussion, like, did he talk to the other ones to try to, like, make a decision, or was like he showed up and was like no, and then peaced out, and then, like, like, because I'd imagine that probably would have been like, what the hell kind of moment. Maybe, I don't know. I know there's like, there's like 50 books on the Horus Heresy, so I guess I don't even, I'm sure that that was probably deeper than what he's saying. Maybe I have no idea. It, but, like, just the way that he kind of explains it, it sounded like he just kind of flew in and was like, yeah, no, and then left, which I would imagine would feel like a slap in the face for some.
coincided with a few other developments that strained the legions. The Emperor's children enacted the cleansing of the Xenos planet of Lairan, defeating the alien Leia within a month, but the influence of the Leia caused the legion's apothecaries to start experimenting with the legion's gene seed in imitation, and the sword their Primarch Fulgrim took from the wreckage of the civilization was an ancient demon blade that began his long corruption. And on the planet of Nerth, the Alpha Legion were brought into contact with a group of ancient Xenos species known as the Cabal, who warned them of the upcoming war and how, in their opinion, the triumph of Horus would actually save the galaxy by destroying humanity once and for all. But both of these pale to the fall of Horus himself. As War Master, Horus was already under pressure, but he also felt for the first time abandoned and not a little resentful of his father and of this changing Imperium. For centuries,
Right.
the Imperium was the Primarchs and the Crusade, but with the new Council of Terror taking control of compliance systems, with remembrancers moving through the fleets to document their actions, and with the Emperor gone to apparently more important matters, what the Astartes and the Primarchs would do once it was all over started to weigh on all their minds. Horus wanted a legacy. Initially, he tried magnanimity. When his Crusade fleet encountered the civilized Interrex in 002, Horus chose to overlook their alliance with alien species in the name of collaboration, despite his commander's calls for war. But when an ancient demon weapon, preserved by the Interrex as a warning from history, was stolen during the negotiations and war inevitably occurred, his plans for a new way of running the Crusade were shattered.
Did he steal it? So like my memory in all of these is probably not the best since it has taken me a minute to get through all of them. But I mean that sounds fair to have like this demon weapon as a reminder, and then it got stolen. That's not good. That is not good. That's a bad decision.
Inevitably occurred, his plans for a new way of running the Crusade were shattered. With some Primarchs still chafing at the new commander and seeking to visibly reinforce his authority, he finally gave in to a request by the Emperor in 03 and renamed his legion the Sons of Horus. But the turning point was still to come. Unknown to Horus, it was the chaplain Erebus of the Word-Bearers who had stolen that demon weapon.
Oh, Erebus. Okay. Yes. Okay. Erebus, I do remember because I mean that one wasn't that long ago, but okay. Like I feel like sometimes there's things that I just can't remember. I mean, there's only so much like my brain is going to absorb at one time going through all this, but I feel like that was not a good move. I feel like that was not a good move. Not a good idea.
Known to Horus, it was the chaplain Erebus of the Word-Bearers who had stolen that demon weapon from the Interrex. In 04, he gave the Anathame weapon to Eugen Temba, human commander of the world of Davin, whose disappointment at being left behind by the Crusade was exploited by the weapon, which overcame and possessed him. Erebus then called Horus to Davin on a matter of urgency and manipulated him into leading the assault on Temba's position himself. While Horus killed the mutant thing that Temba had become, he was mortally wounded by the Anathame in return. Far from support, and with the War Master dying of an unknown warp illness, the distraught Sons of Horus gave in to Erebus' suggestion that Horus be handed over to the Serpent Lodge for a spiritual cure, something...
Yeah, this I remember. This I remember because this was just like they served him up on a silver plate for him.
Just be handed over to the Serpent Lodge for a spiritual cure, something many of them were very uncomfortable with, especially because it turned out to be a chaos-worshipping cult kept alive in secret by the Word-Bearers on that planet. Inside the Serpent Lodge of Davin, Erebus' devotion to chaos was revealed, and the Chaos Powers showed Horus a dark future, where the Emperor was worshipped as a god, and Horus was forgotten, claiming this was the Emperor's plan all along. The Primarch Magnus the Red, far away on Prospero, illegally used his psychic powers to try and wake Horus to keep him from falling, but he was rejected, and for whatever reason, whether his growing discontent or his manipulation by the powers of chaos, Horus fell. For the rest of 04, Horus recovered and moved swiftly to secure his position before he chose to reveal this new treachery. But he wasn't the only one moving swiftly. After Horus's rejection of Magnus's pleas, Magnus decided that the Emperor needed to be warned. Seeking to prove how useful his psychic powers could be, he enacted a ritual to project his spirit form into the Emperor's throne room to warn him of Horus's treachery, but the plan backfired. The message was lost, and the psychic intrusion broke the seals on the Webway project, which was then invaded by hordes of warp demons as the war in the Webway broke out.
Right. And I I kind of feel bad for Magnus. I do. I kind of feel bad for him. It was like he had all these good intentions and just, bro just couldn't get it right. It didn't, it didn't matter how how good and how hard he tried. It was like, I have all this important insight and I'm going to tell everybody in the absolute worst way possible. I kind of feel bad for the dude a little bit.
Was then invaded by hordes of warp demons as the war in the Webway broke out. The effort required to keep the demons at bay would see the Emperor confined to the Golden Throne for the rest of the war, lest the whole of Terra be lost to chaos. Furious, the Emperor demanded Magnus and his legion be brought before him in chains and tasked Leman Russ and his Space Wolves to do this. But Horus was already in the process of planning his first open moves and took advantage. As War Master, the orders came through him, and he made it clear that Magnus was to be killed. And so, during the Battle of Prospero, the loyal Space Wolves Legion almost destroyed the loyal Thousand Suns Legion, laid waste to their planet, and broke the back of Magnus, who managed to spirit away the final remnants of his legion to a planet deep within the Eye of Terror. With nowhere else to go, the Thousand Suns would eventually end up siding with the traitors. Meanwhile, Horus was using his position as War Master to show favour to his potential allies. He provoked war with the advanced Orician technocracy, using the rare technology they possessed as a bargaining chip to turn Mars and the Mechanicum to his side. He favoured the Emperor's Children, Death Guard, World Eaters, Iron Warriors, and Night Lords with better resupplies, even encouraging the Iron Warriors in the destruction of their homeworld, Olympia. And as the year turned to 05, he dispatched those he thought will remain loyal on campaigns to the furthest edges of the galaxy. The Blood Angels were sent to Cygnus Prime, officially to confront the Xenos Nephilim, but they became embroiled.
Okay, so this was, so he thought that if they were like the more loyal ones, that they would be safer if he sent them further away. So then the ones that he didn't think that were going to be loyal once all of this gets started would be the closer, quicker ones to get taken out.
Angels were sent to Cygnus Prime, officially to confront the Xenos Nephilim, but they became embroiled in a war against a horde of demons and lost from communication with the rest of the Imperium. The powerful Dark Angels Legion was sent to the far-off eastern fringes on crusades of conquest, and the Ultramarines, the largest of the legions, were ordered to muster in their own domains, also on the eastern fringe, ahead of a huge apparent war of conquest to come. Finally, with his pieces in position, in 05, Horus gathered 4 legions to the rebellious world of Istvan III, officially to put down the rebellion in a show of strength.
Okay, so this is where this one comes into. Okay. Now everything's starting to make more sense.
But in reality, this was his chance to rid his allies of their more loyalist elements. The Sons of Horus, Death Guard, World Eaters, and Emperor's Children deployed those units and officers they felt would never turn to the surface to crush the rebellion, and then annihilated the planet with virus bombs from orbit. The intention was that this too would be a secret, but when the survivors managed to hide out in the underground shelters of the planet and the war dragged on the surface, one ship managed to escape. The Eisenstein, commanded by the loyalist Death Guard captain Nathaniel Garrow, eventually managed to reach Terra and inform the Imperium of the betrayal. The news was out. Horus and 3 other legions had turned traitor.
Man, you know that like that was gonna happen. There's no way that I guess you would have pulled this off, and not one person would have squeaked out to go tell on you. That is not surprising.
The news was out. Horus and 3 other legions had turned traitor. The Imperium, led by the Primarch Rogel Dawn of the Imperial Fists, attempted to formulate a response. The Blood Angels and the Ultramarines were still out of contact at the edges of the Imperium. The Dark Angels were embroiled against the Gordian League on Diamat, and the White Scars were still prosecuting the Chondax campaign, kept artificially isolated from communication by Horus. As such, a retribution fleet was assembled from the legions that were contactable, smaller legions that Horus had left in the relative centre of the Imperium. And this fleet was tasked with blockading the Isfan system and bringing the traitor legions to justice. The Iron Hands, Raven Guard, and Salamanders would arrive first and await reinforcements from the Word Bearers, Iron Warriors, Night Lords, Alpha Legion, and finally the Imperial Fists, making the long journey from Terra. But as the forces moved into position, rebellions broke out elsewhere. In late 05, the Schism of Mars began as the Fabricator Generals sided with Horus and an oily civil war erupted. The Imperial Fists had to divert forces to rescue war material from the planet, while their section of the Retribution Fleet was becalmed in the warp and made no progress to Isfahan.
Okay, so now this is where stuff starts getting going here. So now we are really just making chaos everywhere then. I mean, that's what I mean. It's like this started, and now we have this kind of like domino effect of now people are choosing sides and it's causing all kinds of problems.
Retribution fleet was becalmed in the warp and made no progress to Isfahan. At the Isfahan system, the Raven Guard, Salamanders, and Iron Hands arrived in early '06 under the command of the Iron Hands Primarch, Ferrus Manus, but he was so incensed by the betrayal, he opted to make immediate planetfall against the traitor defenses
Right.
prepared on the world of Isfahan 5.
Right. He's the one that didn't wait because I remember that story was he didn't wait. He just went right in because he was so pissed. That I do remember too.
Instead of waiting for the full Imperial response to arrive.
Yeah.
The initial assault consisted of the majority of the Raven Guard and Salamander's legions, assisted by the elite of the Iron Hands, and it pushed into the Urgal Depression, facing
Had he waited, would he? I mean, like, would this have played out differently if he could have just waited a little bit longer for everybody else to show up, or would it had just been closer?
by the elite of the Iron Hands, and it pushed into the Urgal Depression, facing the guns of the Sons of Horus, World Eaters, Death Guard, and Emperor's Children. But as their reinforcements landed behind them, the battle turned into a massacre. The second wave, the Word Bearers, Alpha Legion, Iron Warriors, and Night Lords, revealed their loyalty to Horus, and the Loyalists were cut down in a brutal crossfire. Ferrus Manus was killed by his brother Fulgrim, and the majority of the Raven Guard and Salamander's legions were slaughtered. The Primarch of the Salamanders, Vulcan, was taken prisoner by Conrad Kurz of the Night Lords, and the Primarch of the Raven Guard, Corax, fought a weeks-long guerrilla war in the rubble before being rescued by his own fleet. With this move, the battle lines had been drawn. 9 legions had sided with Horus, and they'd succeeded in killing one Primarch, capturing another, and almost destroying 2 entire Loyalist legions. But the Loyalists fought back wherever they could. The remnants of the Salamanders and the Raven Guard, along with the leaderless companies of the Iron Warriors, would continue to harass the traitor forces for the rest of the war as the guerrilla companies known as the Shattered Legions, picking up isolated loyalist elements as they went. And while the main Imperial Fist's fleet never reached Isfahan, a separate fleet managed to blockade the Sons of Horus' home planet of Chthoniya and fought a brutal war through the tunnels and caverns of the planet for the rest of the conflict.
Okay. I do remember hearing about this one too. Okay, so now this is like now we're moving along here. We are moving along. Now I'm so happy that this video exists because now it is all starting to make more sense.
Though the heresy was revealed, the Loyalists were still largely on the back foot, so Horus dispatched his allies to reinforce his initial advantage. At the end of '06, hot on the heels of the drop site massacre, the Alpha Legion assaulted and seized Paramar and, accompanied by elements of the Emperor's Children, the system of Beta Garman, both of which would be strategically important for the traitors' eventual march on Terra. The Sons of Horus, aided by the Death Guard, assaulted the valuable industrial sectors of the Coronid Deeps, starting the Manichaean War as they attempted to turn the vital forge worlds of the area to their cause. All 3 of these conflicts would persist for years. Much of the Imperium was still in darkness. The Blood Angels had defeated the hordes of demons on Cygnus Prime, though they were shaken by the first mass appearance of what would later become known as the Red Thurs. And the Dark Angels, attacked by a rogue Sons of Horus fleet in the Rangda system, had been alerted to the events of Istvan, but Horus still had plans to unfurl. In '07, the Night Lords were dispatched to the Eastern Fringe to draw the Dark Angels into a series of conflicts across the Ultima Segmentum known as the Thramas Crusade. Conrad Kurz and his legion caused chaos and distraction on Sagwalsa and across the Triplex and Thramas sectors, keeping the Dark Angels occupied for the next few years.
Realistically, this is kind of quite the logistics that ends up coming out of this. I know this is like a whole thing, and I know the Horus Heresy is kind of a big deal because it kind of, you know, sets the tone for the future of the universe. But to have so many moving parts of this, it's kind of cool to see.
Meanwhile, Lorgar and his word bearers made their way to the great Ultramarines muster point at Calth, one of the few areas of the galaxy still in the dark about the Heresy. The Ultramarines and their Primarch, Robert Gilliman, had been ordered by Horus to gather their forces and await reinforcement from the word bearers before pushing outwards to contest a nearby area of the galaxy held by orcs. At the orbital shipyards of Calth, the word bearers betrayed the Ultramarines, opening fire and destroying hundreds of ships and raining debris down on the planet itself. Dedicating the deaths to the gods of the warp, the word bearers enacted a dark ritual that saw Calth's sun poisoned and raised the Ruin Storm, a great warp storm that would keep the eastern fringe isolated from the rest of the Imperium, with the Dark Angels, Ultramarines, and Blood Angels trapped on the far side. At the same time, traitor Titan legions mustering with the World Eaters on Ithaca as part of the same push turned on the loyalist Legio Praesidius. The conflicts at Calth and Ithaca became the beginnings of the Crusade of Iron, as the remnants of Praesidius sought revenge for the betrayal at Ithaca, and the Shadow Crusade, as word bearers and world eaters, under the command of their primarchs Lorgar and Angron, rampaged across Ultramar, all in revenge for the word bearers' humiliation at the hands of the Ultramarines all those years ago. But they weren't the only legion looking for revenge. The Iron
It's like there's so much going on here. I don't. I can I can see why we have so many books written about the Horus Heresy, because you could literally pick any instance of this the whole chunk of time and make like several books, novels. I mean, I get it. I get it. This is this is very interesting to see as the whole timeline after watching about all the Primarchs. It's kind of interesting to see it all now like laid out for me.
warriors, leaving Istvan, took the opportunity to attack their old rivals, the Imperial Fists, first assaulting the becalmed Retribution fleet during the Battle of the Fall system, and then assaulting the Imperial Fists garrison on Hydra Caudatus. Linking up with the Emperor's children and their Primarch, Fulgrim, they then journeyed deep into the Eye of Terror on a quest to find the weapon known as the Angel Exterminatus. But Fulgrim betrayed Perturabo on the Chrome world of Idris, attempting to sacrifice him to fuel his own ascension to demonhood.
Right.
Perturabo escaped, but Fulgrim was still transformed into a demon prince of Slanesh. By this point, the heresy was fully revealed, and with it, war broke out across the galaxy as Astartes, human, and Mechanicum forces all declared either for the loyalists or the traitors. But there was one legion that still hadn't declared. Still on campaign, hunting the orcs of Chondax, the White Scars had been kept in the dark by the Alpha Legion, who'd been blocking all communication in and out of the system. But the Alpha Legion were not as united as they appeared, and during the Tenebrae mission, the Primarch Omegon dispatched a force of legionnaires to destroy the Legion's own blocking station, allowing news of the heresy to filter through. Confused, the White Scars and their Primarch Jagatai Khan broke through the Alpha Legion blockade and made all speed to Prospero, attempting to verify the rumours they'd been fed that the Space Wolves had turned traitor and destroyed the Thousand Suns. In the second Battle of Prospero, they fought past Death Guard forces led by Mortarion and discovered one of the broken shards of Magnus the Red in the ruins, and learning the truth, the White Scars declared for the Emperor. They'd fight a fast-paced guerrilla war across the Imperium for the next few years as they attempted to make the journey back to Terra. As well as the White Scars, the Alpha Legion also waylaid and ambushed the Space Wolves in the Alaxes Nebula, who were coming to realise that they had also been tricked. Also, planning to return to Terra, they were only able to begin their journey when the Dark Angels Starfort Chimera, loyal to the Lutherian exiles on Caliban, but totally unaware of the heresy, broke the Alpha Legion blockade of the Nebula.
It's insane to see how many of them had no idea what was going on, even though, I mean, like, I guess to realize that they were cut off from any sort of communications. And then once everything came to light, that must have been like a bombshell getting landed on them, that like they probably thought everybody was on the same page and everybody's doing their job. Everyone's, playing their parts. And then you get this bomb dropped on you and now you have to choose. And I mean, like, whether or not some of them felt more like they were looking at each other as brothers or not, it still creates like quite quite a divide for sure. But I feel like you probably didn't even have enough time to process it all because you probably had to pick a side and make a choice somewhat fast because everything there was just so much going on.
But totally unaware of the heresy, broke the Alpha Legion blockade of the nebula. Finally, through the whole of '07, the Loyalists attempted to fight back. Corax of the Raven Guard travelled to Terra and was gifted rare genetic technology by an embattled Emperor, which he then attempted to use to hothouse new Astartes on his Legion base of Deliverance. However, the project had yet again been infiltrated by the Alpha Legion, who
Yeah.
seemed really well prepared for this. And the resulting Astartes, created by the Sabotage Project, were
I mean, the Alpha Legion just seems like they were everywhere and nowhere at the same time. That is what I've learned. Some of these they are everywhere and nowhere, and that's how they get you.
seemed really well prepared for this. And the resulting Astartes, created by the Sabotage Project, were
Right.
horrifically mutated, while the Alpha Legion made off with the genetic samples. Putting aside the project, as 7 turned to 8, the Raven Guard launched into a new wave of guerrilla assaults on Skarato, Constantin, and Karandiru, as other shattered Legion forces were starting to seriously hamper the traitor advance. The war in the Corinid Deeps concluded with the taking of the Forge world of Mezoa, and then the fall of Manichaea itself, freeing the War Master's forces up to push onwards, but a shattered Legion force led by the Iron Hand Shadrach Meduson held out on the planet of Dwell, and used their position to lure the War Master into an assassination attempt. Later in the year, a second attempt will be made on the War Master's life by an execution force of Imperial assassins on the world of Dagonet, leading to brutal reprisals by the Sons of Horus across the Imperium. The Iron Hands clan Morrigal, led by Ortek Moore, annihilated the World Eater's recruiting world of Bolt, and far away on Perditus, the Dark Angels came to the aid of an Iron Hands force fighting Kalas Typhon and his Death Guard, and came away with the mysterious Tukulka device, which allowed them to navigate with some success through the warp storms of the Eastern Fringe. Also beyond the Ruin Storm, the Shadow Crusade came to its conclusion on the world of Nuceria, the home world of Angron. As the Word-Bearers and World Eaters destroyed the planet's population, they came under attack by an Ultramarines reprisal fleet led by Guilliman, and in the resulting slaughter, Lorgar attempted to save his brother Angron by turning him into a demon prince of Khorne.
Right.
The end of the Shadow Crusade was then followed by the end of the Crusade of Iron at the Battle of Druth II, where both the Loyalist and traitor Titan commanders were killed. Elsewhere, the fires of war continued to burn. On Calth, a brutal underground war emerged.
It's just like this was such a time with all of this going on. I guess when you look at the big picture of this and seeing like where it started, how it's going, because like we're not at the end of the video yet, but it seems like it sounds exhausting. I mean, we have we have so many big wars, side wars, underground wars. I mean, it's like we have people fighting left and right, which like now that I get to see like like where everything has kind of like fit into those places. But it's kind of wild to see this timeline that this all was going on for such a long time. I can definitely see where like you have like a big chunk of lore that comes from this.
The fires of war continued
It's
to burn.
cool.
On Calth, a brutal underground war emerged between the Ultramarine and Word-Bearer forces stranded during the betrayal, unable to set foot outside because of the poisoned sun. Loyalist and traitor Titans fought over the Mydran system. Mechanicum's civil war erupted through the Forge worlds of Anvilus, and the traitor fleet besieged important Loyalist worlds, the Blood Angels' home world of Baal, that had become something of a bastion of defiance for those Loyalists who escaped Istvan, and the Imperial Fist's home world of Inwit were both blockaded by traitor fleets in '08 and '09. As the traitors were mostly freed from conflict in the Coronid Deeps, the Solar Auxilia Marshal Ayrton Massad had rallied Imperial forces at Numenal and Agathon, but the major Forge worlds had all fallen into the traitors' hands. Horus set his sights on the next step of his plan, the Night World of Molech, the site of a gateway into the realm of chaos, one that the Emperor had used thousands of years previously to steal knowledge from the Chaos powers. Horus would need to make a similar bargain if he wished to defeat the Emperor. A huge invasion was launched in 09, headed by the Sons of Horus and the Death Guard under Mortarion, where the first Plague Marines saw battle. Though the capital of Lupercalia was heavily defended by Knights, Blood Angels, and Ultramarines, it eventually fell when the Night House Divine turned traitor. At the same time, on the far western edge of the galaxy, the traitor-aligned Forge world of Zana suffered numerous raids, first by emerging Black Shield forces, Marine forces that fought on neither side for the Heresy, and then by a Dark Angels force who recovered Ordinatus engines intended for the Sons of Horus. The chaos on that world would lead to the release of the tech heretic Anacharis Scoria and the eventual transformation of the planet into the first of the Hell Forges. The Dark Angels were
First of the Hell Forges. Okay. God, I feel like there's so much going on. There's just so much going on. Like I kind of figured that, we would have, big battles and some other things here and there, but this now that I can see it and understand it more, it is way more than I was kind of realizing, I guess. Jeez.
also active beyond the Ruin Storm. Aided by the Tukulka device, they finally managed to scatter the Night Lord's fleet at Sheol 9, their Primarch, THURS, eventually escaping to the depths of the Dark Angel's flagship, the Invincible Reason. With the Night Lords no longer a threat, the fleet headed through the warp storms towards Ultramar, where the warp beacon of the Pharos had been lit on Sotha by scattered Imperial fists and loyalist Iron Warriors working alongside the Ultramarines. Over the course of the next year, more and more scattered loyalist elements would arrive in the Ultramarines' domain, following the signal beacon of the Pharos, including the Blood Angels fleet, still attempting to return from Cygnus. This would lead to one of the more controversial events of the period. Unaware of if the Imperium even still existed beyond the Ruin Storm, and fearing that the Emperor had already been defeated, Guilliman declared Imperium Secundus, a new Imperium, with Sanguinius of the Blood Angels as its Emperor, and Lion L. Johnson of the Dark Angels as its Lord Protector, neither of whom were particularly comfortable with the idea, even if they understood its reason for existing.
Yeah.
After a brief incident in which Conrad Kurz escaped the Dark Angels flagship and caused terror across the capital of Macragge, eventually resulting in the partial destruction of the Pharos device at the Battle of Sotha, he was captured and imprisoned by the Loyalists, who also rediscovered the body of Vulcan, Primarch of the Salamanders, incoherent and barely aware since his escape from the Night Lord's flagship at Thramas. The following year, in year 10,
which was crazy. I do remember Vulcan's story, and that was insane. Like, bro, crazy. I mean, that was, that was quite the ordeal that he had to go through and endure.
Since his escape from the Night Lord's flagship at Thramas. The following year, in year 10, the Salamanders present in the Imperium Secundus would battle through the Ruin Storm to return their Primarch to their homeworld of Nocturne, defeating the Death Guard during the Battle of Nocturne, and eventually resurrecting Vulcan. Existing conflicts exploded across the Belt of Iron, a region of space held by several prized Forge worlds. Religious differences pulled more and more of the Mechanicum into a conflict that became known as the Cataclysm of Iron, which eventually involved the worlds of Urdesh, Atar Median, Graia, Calabrax, and Valia Maximal, and their respective Titan legions.
So at this point in time, do we just not care about, technology and psychic abilities and all that stuff? Because it seems like there is quite the divide, and seems like with all the wars going on, maybe nobody cares anymore, and everyone's just going like full out. And as far as any sort of rules of engagement or things that they thought were forbidden is not now, like that's kind of off the table, because it seems like there's lots of instances where some of this keeps showing up. And so Like maybe that's just like a war thing that, because we have so many wars going on that like maybe we just don't care now.
Another major theatre opened on the planet of Talon, as the Iron Warriors, finally escaping from the Eye of Terror, laid waste to the planet in the hope of capturing the Black Oculus, an ancient artifact buried beneath its surface. Virus bombs turned the once verdant world into an endless desert. The Loyalist forces forced to fight from within sealed vehicles in what would become the biggest tank engagement of the Horus Heresy.
Oh,
Elsewhere, the Loyalists went on the offensive, Rogel Dawn of the Imperial Fists organising a massive counter-offensive on the war-racked world of Beta Garment, the largest concentration of Loyalist forces in the galaxy at that time, led by the Imperial Fists and the Salamanders, pushed out the Emperor's Children garrison at the First Battle of Nearcon and left the system in Imperial hands, though a traitor counterattack would start before the end of the year as Horus finally started his push towards Terra. And as the traitors realigned towards their goal, the
it's crazy that at this point in time, I feel like after everything that's gone on and everything that we're going, like he's just starting to make it to Terra now. like, bro has been busy. There has been lots of things going on. There has been lots of death, and we are just now starting to, get to Terra at this point. It's kind of like a wild timeline to think about.
Solar War began, as Alpha Legion forces started to test the defences of the solar system itself, the first major conflict of which was the Battle of Pluto, as over 200 Alpha Legion ships assaulted the Imperial monitoring stations there. The battle was ended when Rogel Dawn killed the Primarch Alfarius, scattering the Alpha Legion fleet, but raids and attacks would continue for the next few years. But as the traitors started to gather for the push to Terra, so did the disparate loyalists. In 11, the White Scars, still searching for a route back to Terra while conducting a hit-and-run campaign for the last 4 years, made two major advances. First against the Emperor's Children at the Battle of the Callium Gate, and then against the Death Guard during the Battle of Catalyst, where they activated an ancient dark glass array and managed to traverse the Webway and return to Terra. While at a similar time, Vulcan of the Salamanders used an alternate webway path to get from the Battle of Nocturne to the heart of the Imperial Palace. But the biggest concentration of Loyalist forces were still stranded out on the Eastern Fringe, after numerous visions convinced them that the Emperor and the Imperium did still survive. Guilliman, Sanguinius, and the Lion dissolved the Imperium Secundus and attempted to break through the Ruinstorm. Encountering numerous
You kind of can't blame them for, I mean, as far as like everything else going on, and then they went over here and started a new Imperium. I feel like you kind of can't blame them because you have no idea what's going on, and it's pretty bad. Like stuff's pretty bad going on right now. So if you didn't have maybe the most positive outlook on the outcome of all of this, it kind of makes sense that's what they would do. And those three seem like they would have made a pretty good Imperium. Whether, I mean, I understand like with Sanguinius probably didn't want to be seen as like a emperor of anything, but knew the importance of it. But it kind of made like I kind of don't really blame them, and I don't necessarily feel like they were being neglectful either. It was just kind of like it's kind of just like a it is what it is situation, and they were just kind of acting accordingly or what they thought was best.
traitor and demonic fleets during the battles of Anari and Piran, the three legions eventually came to the center of the Ruinstorm at Davin. During the Second Battle of Davin, against a huge demonic incursion, the Loyalist fleet bombarded the planet with cyclonic torpedoes, weakening the Ruinstorm and opening a stable route through, though it was blockaded by a traitor fleet. Cutting their losses, the Ultramarines and the Dark Angels fleets opted to engage and distract the traitors so that the Blood Angels could make it through to Terra.
Right.
By 12, the Battle of Talon ended as Horus consolidated his forces and pulled Perturabo and his Iron Warriors away, and with Loyalist forces gathering, they once again went on the offensive. During the Battle of Trizolian, Liman Russ and the Space Wolves Legion ambushed Horus's flagship anchored above Trizolian 4A, and the two Primarchs fought in the depths of Horus's flagship, but while Russ managed to wound Horus, he was seriously injured in return, and with Russ unconscious, his legion were forced to pull back to Yarant with the traitor forces in pursuit. They were eventually rescued by Korax and the Raven Guard, but they suffered horrific losses, eventually pushing them out of the war. And with the Ruin Storm weakening, the Dark Angels took advantage of clearing space lanes to engage in a campaign of retribution against the traitors across the Southern Imperium, destroying the Legion homeworlds of Chemos and Barbarous as the Ultramarines continued to press on through the remaining storm, slowly advancing on Terra. Rogel Dawn mustered even more forces on Beta Garman, including huge numbers of Titan legions, as Horus, despite his wounds, committed to a major assault on the system with his own Titan legions. Eventually, Beta Garman became one of the biggest and most destructive theatres of the campaign, this part of the war dubbed the Titan Death for the numbers of losses suffered by the legios of both sides. The war on Beta Garman continued into 13, both sides pouring forces into the fray, including fleets from the Blood Angels and the White Scars arriving to attempt to hold the traitors until the Ultramarine fleet could force a path through.
Okay, so this seems like this one was a pretty big deal too. I mean, look at everybody that's here. I feel like this one's definitely a big deal, maybe bigger deal as far as now that we are so close to Terra.
But while the traitors continued to fight, their high command was falling apart. Horus, succumbing to his wounds, fell into a coma. Disgusted by this and rethinking his decision to corrupt Horus all those years ago, Lorgar of the Wordbearers attempted to usurp control of the traitor forces, summoning Angron to his side and journeying into the warp to bring Fulgrim back to real space. But Horus eventually rallied, casting Lorgar down, exiling him, and taking control of the remaining Wordbearers through Wordbearers officers still loyal directly to him. With traitor forces back under the control of the War Master and the Ultramarines still struggling through the storms, delayed by engagements with the Alpha Legion, the Loyalists finally cut their losses and quit the ruined Beta Garman system, pulling back to Terra and the Solar System for the final phase of the war as the traitor forces mustered for their last push at Ullanor, where this story started 13 years before.
Yeah.
They were joined by Magnus the Red and his 1,000 sons, now dedicated to the chaos-powered Tzeentch, his sons having collected the shards of their ruined father and reassembled him in the warp. Across the galaxy, conflict started to ramp down as theatres were bled dry of troops or their combatants attempted to reach Terra. The underground war on Calth finally came to a close as the Ultramarines, reinforced from within Ultramar, purged the remaining Wordbearers from the caverns, and the Loyalists finally took the lead in the Titan War in the Belt of Iron as the Cataclysm of Iron came to an end after the Siege of Graia. Finally, as the Death Guard fleet moved from the purging of Einix, they were becalmed in the warp, and through the manipulation of their first captain, Kalas Typhon, Mortarion pledged his legion to Nurgle. Everything was now focused on Terra, as in 14, the traitor fleet burned.
So it's like after all of this, we finally get to Terra, which, I mean, this is an intense timeline. I feel like we got so much going on, and now we're at it. Like now we are finally there. But man, Horus was busy. Horus was busy and kept a lot of people busy.
Was now focused on Terra, as in 14, the traitor fleet burned through the meager Loyalist defences that still remained in the solar system and opened 2 warp gates in system to allow their fleets to bypass the Mandeville points.
I will say it does kind of seem like had they maybe kept their shit together, essentially for the traitor side, I feel like they almost could have maybe had a shot at winning.
2 warp gates in system to allow their fleets to bypass the Mandeville points. A Sons of Horus fleet took Pluto, linchpin of the first sphere of defense, and an Iron Warriors fleet under Perturabo took Uranus in the second sphere as a swarm of Emperor's Children and renegade ships attacked the moons of Jupiter and Saturn. The Sons of Horus fleet then assailed Luna directly from the warp gates, taking over the ancient Selenar gene vaults as Shattered Legion forces managed to liberate the Magna Mater, the original genetic templates for the construction of the legions. Something the Loyalists would make use of thousands of years later.
Yeah.
Overrunning the moon, the traitor fleet took position in orbit of Terra, and on the 13th of Secundus, the bombardment of Terra began. The Siege of Terra itself is such a huge conflict that it deserves its own video, but in short, the
Yeah.
traitors, masterminded by Perturabo, systematically took apart the walls of the Emperor's palace, making gains with the taking of first the Lion's Gate and then the Eternity Wall spaceports, while Horus, Magnus, and the Word-Bearers under Zardu Lyak attempted to weaken the Emperor's psychic barrier enough that their demonic allies might manifest. They were resisted by the Blood Angels, the White Scars, and the Imperial Fists, aided by the Legio Custodes, the Sisters of Silence, and the millions of remaining human troops. But the Emperor himself and the majority of his Custodes' bodyguard were engaged attempting to stop waves of demons from crashing through the webway barriers deep underneath the palace. The conflict ramped up for months as the traitors landed Dark Mechanicum siege engines, titans, and hordes of mutants and cultists, and the defenders were slowly bled dry. Angron, demon primarch of the Word-Bearers, fought and was bested by Sanguinius of the Blood Angels at Eternity Gate. Magnus fought Vulcan deep within the webway. Fulgrim was beaten by Rogel Dawn on the walls of the palace and quit the battle, disappearing into the warp while his legion rampaged through the undefended citizenry outside the walls. Perturabo, incensed at his siege plans being bypassed and questioned by other traitor commanders, quit the battle and pulled his forces from the theatre, and Jagatai Khan of the White Scars banished Mortarion of the Death Guard during a daring recapture of the Lion's Gate port, but still the defenders were pushed back until all that remained was the inner palace itself. And through all this, Horus, swollen with the power of chaos, pit his mind against that of the Emperor from his flagship in orbit. But eventually, as the noose wound tighter and both sides bled themselves dry, the signal was received that the Ultramarines and Dark Angels fleets were finally inbound. And whether by coincidence or design, Horus dropped the shields of his flagship, enticing the Emperor to finally take the field. The Emperor's
I feel like that was like maybe like more of an ego move, and maybe he underestimated the Emperor. I don't think there was a winner here.
regent, Malcador the Sigillite, took his position on the Golden Throne as the Emperor, Dawn, and Sanguinius teleported onto the Vengeful Spirit. Fighting through hordes of demons, the Emperor finally reached Horus's throne room, only to find Sanguinius already dead by his hand. And though he killed the War Master, he was mortally wounded in return.
Right.
The heresy ended there, with the death of Horus Lupercal at the hand of the Emperor. The loyalist forces almost annihilated, and the traitor forces turned to chaos and disarray. The Imperium, the product of the Great Crusade, was a ruin. Worlds reduced to rubble and billions dead. In the years that followed, the Ultramarines and the remnants of the other loyalist legions would hound the traitors back into the region of warp space known as the Eye of Terror. And the Imperium itself would slowly rebuild, but with the Emperor catatonic and half the Primarchs turned to chaos or dead, it would never again reach the heights it had just 14 years before at the Triumph of Ullanor. The Emperor's great plan
14 years or 13 years for all this stuff. I mean, I feel like that's not really that long of a time for everything that kind of happened and ensued. I feel like that's kind of like a pretty rapid timeline. And now we're here, and it's like everything is broken and falling apart, and Primarchs are broken or dead, and I mean that the Emperor, now is on his throne, and can't do a whole lot, but like it's kind of wild how probably like something that would have ended up being maybe like a interesting universe, like had things had gone the way that the Emperor wanted to what it is now to today. It's kind of cool. It's kind of cool, like I like the manipulation, the wars, the ongoing wars, the the rise and falls of some of these Primarchs and the battles and being on Terra and everything like that happened there. It's it does make for a very interesting story and kind of a base, I guess.
14 years before at the Triumph of Ullanor. The Emperor's great plan was over. His gamble to defeat chaos had failed, and the Imperium that emerged from the ruins would ponderously roll on, slowly crumbling under its own weight for the next 10,000 years. And it's interesting when it's recounted like that, just how that all happened.
Yeah.
Horus might have engineered himself a perfect position at the start of the heresy. The loyalists deliberately scattered. The
He did. I will say I do feel like Horus had a pretty solid plan for the most part. Like obviously it was like clearly it wasn't perfect, but I think he started out definitely ahead and did have, like keeping the fact that he was going to be a traitor a secret for so long. I it did give him kind of a leg up in the beginning. I think he did have a good head start to this.
perfect position at the start of the heresy. The loyalists deliberately scattered. The original forces sent to stop him in the perfect position to be annihilated.
Yeah.
At the start of the war, it seemed like he'd be hard to stop. But the traitors still needed to secure industrial bases and supplies from a galaxy that, initially at least, was still loyalist, and maybe
Right.
resisted the arrival of the traitors more than was expected. By the time he'd massed enough resources and obtained enough dark power to march on Terra and challenge the Emperor, his army was falling apart. Chaos was taking its toll. His commanders were more fractious than ever.
Yeah.
Lorgar exiled after a failed coup, Conrad Kurz captured, Alfarius dead, Perturabo quitting the siege after being treated even worse than he was under the Emperor, and
Yeah.
four Primarchs turned into demons and working towards their own agendas, which meant
Oh yeah, I mean, like, unfortunately, I think that's where it all fell apart for him is that yeah, you had you had a good plan, but I I guess maybe we didn't take into consideration what chaos would have done because then it seemed like everybody was like fighting amongst each other, going off having their own side quests, getting distracted. I mean, we have demon princes now that are have totally different agendas, and so like now instead of being on the same page, everybody's kind of scattered all over the place, which probably would make your goal a lot harder if it's like herding cats.
four Primarchs turned into demons and working towards their own agendas, which meant that while Terra was still grossly outnumbered, the two remaining Loyalist legions making their way through the Ruinstorm were a genuine threat and
Yeah.
turned the final siege into a race against time. Anyway, there we go. The Horus Heresy. As I said, the Siege of Terra could be a whole other one of these, but we've got a
Right.
bit more information to be filled in before that becomes possible. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this mammoth story,
Yes.
and thanks for watching.
I really enjoyed this video. I think this really helped me kind of put everything into the right places after learning about all the Primarchs. So I really did enjoy this video, and my hat goes off to Mr. Arbiter Ian for putting this together in 40 minutes because I feel like uh this could easily been, I don't even know, 100 hours, with everything that goes on in this. So I'm really happy that he made this video because it really did help me kind of put everything into the correct timeline, how things happened. And there was like also some other tidbits here and there that I had no idea about too. So I think this video was absolutely fantastic. So a big thank you to him for this. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I appreciate you guys being here. Be sure to go like and subscribe to Arbiter Ian. Absolutely love his channel. But that's going to do it for me. I hope you guys had a great day, and I will see you in the next one.